So, Quayshawn, you told us about John Henry and how his work was inspiring to you. The story was inspiring to you. You make work about it. Now your work is showing some other figures, some other cultural figures who have had an influence on your identity, and you're making work about them and combining some of them. So I guess tell us what direction your work is going right now.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. The work itself, so as we were talking about just the whole lineage and how we got here and stuff like that, recently, I guess not even recently, it's been since February now, been in a residency with Artist Image Resource in collaboration with Boom Concepts. It's a gallery in Lawrenceville, gallery and exhibition space, residencies, the full nine. So it is myself, an individual named Daryl Kinzel, or DS, who many people know him by, and then Becca Zayla and Gooney. So three of us are in the space collaborating, essentially pulling out some of our own work, our older works, some of our archive pieces, and kind of working with those medias as well. I had an opportunity to start up something new, which was really amazing. Just as we talk about in arts careers and stuff like that, it is a beautiful blessing, an opportunity to be given a space and given the screens and materials, the freedom to just the time, right, to actually do this stuff and do this work, expand on your own body or your own just your artwork itself. And these were born out of this residency. So these pieces that are up here now are not necessarily experiments, but they are they're processing, they're in development. So these prints will, we'll either choose 3 or 4 to edition. I'll probably do an edition of 20 or 30. So when I say edition, meaning that each one will actually be the same as opposed to all the kind of different stuff happening right now. But in the variations, at least for me, is where I'm able to kind of find out or really dig into how I want things to look, or even how things could look, and the opportunity that I have certain resources and elements, and then as well just being in a space like this, having all the screens, why not?
Yeah.
You should really
Keep
take the
trying.
time to just do these different
Test it
things,
out.
try out things.
Yeah.
So with these, John Henry led us into this conversation, even with a mentor of mine who runs the studio here, Robert Beckman, has always kind of been, a great supporter as well, in the space, but even personally with my work. Sometimes he would actually kind of sit me down, do a little bit of critiques and stuff like that with my work. And when John Henry started, since I was working on a larger scale, and I was really starting to dig in on the intricacies of printmaking and even the production side of that. So meaning as we mentioned, it's cool to talk about the colors and the separations, but how do we actually execute that down, and what can happen in between execution? So are we going to block certain elements off? Are we going to add color into the screen? All that good stuff. And Bob really brought up some really great points that John Henry does serve as this kind of functioning body outside of the story, and the body being kind of that key, that text layer that goes onto the screen, or that goes onto your artwork, that it really does solidify the piece. And as well, a lot of the elements that are happening with John are kind of born out of that CMYK process, so to actually kind of break all the layers down and use them as tools, as opposed to trying to create this beautiful photograph, but the C, the M, the Y, and the K all become aspects in the tool belt to kind of figure out, how can I change out these different layers and colors. And being that I was given this opportunity to build a body of work, we essentially started the conversation with, can we maybe find a few more figures that, I've been either working with or I've been having conversations with as well, to expand on the conversation with John. This black body, this individual, this man, this figure that was incredibly powerful for me, but as well is kind of just powerful on the page himself, just as he stands. And the first guy up here, just a little background on my man's up here. This is Professor K.
Professor K.
For the world that does not know, Professor K was a radio DJ and MC on a video game called Jet Set Radio Future.
Yeah, this is DJ Professor K, baby, the master of mayhem, know what I'm saying? Bring you another Tokyo Underground pirate radio broadcast from Jet Set Radio.
Really same conversation we were having about John. This is one of those games I grew up playing.
Right.
Kind of all
Part
the time.
of your growing up life.
And the game itself is incredible. Cell animation on the game looks incredible. It still looks incredible to this day. Even all the conversations about graphics and images stands the test of time. And Professor K is the one who's kind of dropping the knowledge in between the scenes of the different levels that you played.
Yeah.
And he's just a radio host DJ with the image itself. I was one day just playing a game on the Dreamcast and decided essentially to take an actual photograph of the screen, of an actual, actual LCD screen. Yeah, the screenshot, literally.
Yes.
Then from there, pull out the photograph I created, did a little bit of just drawing some paintings and collage onto the photograph, scanned that back in, and turned it into a screen. The screen originally was a CMYK, so same thing with John, but the CMYK layers, actually this is C right here, it's a cyan, this is blue, so this is the one that will essentially go down first, but this is essentially the separation. So we have these separations, it's like having 4 different types of a paintbrush in a way. It's like having different levels of a paintbrush or like different kind of bristles in your paintbrush maybe. But it
Sizes
is,
of brush.
yeah, so there's different levels and values that come out with each screen. So me playing around with the added, with different colors or with even different pressures, or even deciding, well, I really love the detail and texture I get from the blue face, but I don't want any of the background. So I actually decided maybe I want to
Part of
block
that.
off certain pieces of that, but doing that ×4 with each screen, with each level, with each color. So yeah, number 2 in our little breakdown over here, this is Eugene Bullard. Kind of see a little bit of Professor K in the back, so there's the elements that we want to keep. Some of the texture, some of the elements of color, some of just the elements of these figures and bodies throughout all the prints. And really it might just become more and more subtle depending on where the focus lies. For this one we have Eugene Bullard. Eugene Bullard was born in 1895. He was born in France. He was a France Air Force pilot. Actually one of the few African American Air Force pilots in that time. It was early 1900s, so
Yeah,
we can all
that's very
imagine. But he spent many years, on enlisted, and then actually moved to America, which is, where I kind of got connected with his story. He moved to America and actually tried to box in America, because while he was in the Air Force and even spent some time in France, he started boxing a little bit, got a little bit of his prestige, started winning some fights.
Doing
actually
well
got
in
into
France.
doing very
Yeah.
well. Moved to America thinking that the story would be the same, the narrative in terms of just, especially in terms of his fighting and his competition, that, thinking that essentially, you could come over and be the same, whether it means getting a fight or, setting up a fight, but it was not. The love was not there for Eugene. He ended up working as an elevator operator for like a couple years, and then moved back to France, was fighting a little bit more, opened up a very popular club for a couple of like,
Oh, cool.
the earlier black greats like Langston Hughes and stuff like that who were always in Paris. And then he went back to the list again, fought again in the war, and personally, even just in the conversation we were having about John and Professor, Eugene almost speaks as a little bit more of a real role model. I mean, he actually lived. There's no fictional tale behind him.
Right.
He's not a fictional story character in a video game or anything like that. And he, in many ways, connects us into our conversation about Jack Johnson that we'll kind of get into real quick. But Eugene was, in many ways, he's a real story, real person, but his story is almost hard to believe. You know what I mean?
Right.
For him to,
That's a remarkable life.
right. So like for him to be born in I think a lot of it does have to be with him being born in France, born in a different place in a different time.
Sure. The
And,
early
I mean,
1900s,
early
his
1900s.
life would have looked very different
Very
if he was
different
born
if he was born
in
over here. So it is,
Georgia.
and I guess I can admit in saying, I've definitely thought about that personally. You know what I mean? That where I am and where we are as a people. How much different would it have been if I was born somewhere else? And even in the conversation of Pittsburgh versus New York or
Sure.
LA, you know what I mean? Like
What kind of influence does place have on who we become?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's profound to think about it in the essence of, international borders, but, even just to dial back a little bit and think about the art scene in other cities might be a little bit better.
Sure.
And, I could maybe go to DC or go to LA and, be running galleries or something like that,
Sure.
or, really have some different opportunities and spaces for us. But Pittsburgh, the bowl is a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
So, the conversation doesn't necessarily escape as quickly or as easily. So it is a growing conversation. This piece I love a lot. A lot of layers in here. Eugene is a drawing from similar to Jack Johnson as well. They are both from the Fight Bout title show cards, like the
Yeah.
little posters that you would
Poster.
make. Eugene's image is an early image of where the gloves are super duper small, and
yeah.
the tiny shorts on and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's kind of like if some people might be more familiar with Joe Louis, who was a very popular boxer in Detroit. Kind of set the stage for a lot of colored boxers in America to start actually getting that type of title and competition level respect, if you will. And the body itself, even connecting with our friend Jack, the conversation that I was having, connecting with John over here with our conversations of building this work, and especially with Bob in the room, kind of helping me build out, the way I want this particular body of work to look.
Yeah.
It was in some ways important to kind of keep this flow, keep this body, keep this, how would you say, this figure
This
intact,
figure,
you know what I mean? Whether it is
really to stand out.
This standout figure, whether it is a shape or a body going a certain direction or even a certain status or value in the color that we're choosing.
Yeah.
So like Professor, he's a little bit larger. He encompasses more of the paper.
Yes.
But with these guys, it's a little bit more direct when he comes into play. So I do appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
But Eugene's still building. Beautiful, definitely check him out.
Mhm.
And then down to Jack. So 20 years earlier in the game, Jack Johnson, born in America, 1878. One of the greatest heavyweights of all time in the boxing world.
That early.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So like even the conversation, like Joe Louis is actually the next one to come into this to
Sure.
bring that into light. Joe Louis will probably be the next figure that I pull in to just have a little bit of have conversation with, if you will. He's in printmaking. But Jack, actually I started hearing a little bit, started researching a little bit more into his story whenever I heard the not so good aspects of the character behind Jack Johnson. I personally always heard about, his lineage, his legacy as a boxer.
As a boxer.
You know what I mean? What
So
he had
great.
done, where he was,
Yeah.
Australia and beyond, fighting all over the world. And, even outside of all that, he was, I don't want to say the worst role model, but there were aspects that, I researched, and there were things in the community-wise, even just as a person, he loved to drive fast. He liked to drive fast all over the place. And, he gets
It's a reckless
tickets all the time.
driver.
And even just to kind of wrap up the story or the type of character he was, when he was driving fast, if he would get pulled over by the police, he would give the police the tickets at the time. The police would pull you over for a ticket. You'd get $50 ticket.
Right.
So he would actually a lot of times require that money. You know what I mean? If you would give it at the time, you could get it right there.
Huh.
So you would get the $50 ticket.
Right.
And Jack was the type of dude to give you $100 because he's like, I'm gonna drive this fast on the way back too. You know what I mean?
Right,
So if you catch me on the way back, just don't even bother. Just hold on to that $50. So it was, you had this almost next level kind of.
He was going to live the way he was going to live.
Oh, amen. He was going to he's going to live the way he was going to live. He was going to kind of spit in the face of anybody who didn't necessarily agree with that. But, this is also late 1800s, early 1900s. Where we got this big black man, heavyweight boxer, making pretty good money and doing whatever he wants to do, living however he likes to live.
Wow.
And in a time where I read a lot of stories where that wasn't the case for our black brothers and sisters.
Absolutely not.
Jack Johnson kind of had an interesting existence to be able to create his own world, create his own existence, his own little bubble of pleasure and luxury. But at the same time, he was still that outstanding figure of physical specimen in the ring, in the cage, not even in the cage, but in the ring of fighting. So it was a kind of beautiful dichotomy that, I guess once we do reach a certain level, that we do actually, we kind of aside ourselves in that level of greatness. But nowadays, the conversation around Jack Johnson isn't as shiny as it was back then. But
it's
it makes
complicated.
sense. Yeah, it's complicated.
He's a fleshed out, full human, whereas John Henry's a tall tale. We just know this thing about him. This is humans are difficult, are complicated.
Because 100 years from now, if I told someone the story about Jack Johnson, that could sound fake.
Right.
You know what I mean? That
Right.
could sound like that could sound like, or it could sound like it was based on somebody who really did box,
Sure.
or you know what I mean. It wasn't necessarily as prestigious or as glorious as it really was, or you know what I mean. Even now, having conversations about it, the story could change,
Right.
and it could be that Jack Johnson lived to be 150 years old, and he's fighting all over the world
until
and,
his 80s.
and he just
Yeah.
is unbeatable.
Yeah.
But like, there's a beautiful way that these stories are created, and to kind of have this basis or this structure in the real is important. And even just building the work that I'm creating with John, that the conversations that we want to have are important to kind of keep in the reality, in the present.
Right.
That it is a real story. It is a story that had a lot of connection growing up historically for students, for educations, but these stories weren't told
Right.
in those. You know what I mean? So it is that kind of making our own narrative, making our own tall tale, our own little folklore about the way these stories should be told.
So bringing these stories into the forefront so that they can become part of other people's identities, since they have become part of yours, is a really beautiful thing that your pieces are doing. These figures are now being spread farther than, yeah,
That's a good point.
that's really beautiful.
Definitely want to spread them out. Like maybe to get a couple of these in France. That'd be crazy.
That'd be great.
But overall, this experience, really, I mean, we will kind of keep building on this. This has been an opportunity for me to actually take a step back from the work a little bit. Actually sort of have the space to work in, to develop the pieces, develop the images, the screens, but then also have time to do what we're doing right now. Have conversations around the work, step back, look at the work a little bit, figure out that I need something in the back here with this yellow and orange.
This is speaking to you as unfinished for you. So
the center, the detail, John is beautiful, or Jack, excuse me, is beautiful there. But some of them got lost because I was doing some paint. Kind of painted some edges around, so I'll probably put them back on there again in the detail. But it's a rabbit hole that
Sure.
we need to also find a place when we're doing these works that kind of have to cut it off a little bit. You know what I mean? The printmaking.
when is it done?
Yeah, there's so many, and as painters will definitely agree with, painting and covering something up until you feel like you don't like it or you do like it. But it's almost similar to that, but taking a little bit more time to even put the brush down or put the screen down or put the ink on the page, just because the medium is a lot different. So when you make a decision, it's impactful.
Sure.
Sometimes more so than you want.
Right.
Or figuring out that if I did actually add some elements of paint and brush stroke in here, that completely changes the dynamic of the print.
Right.
It almost doesn't really falls in the same lineage as Jack, where it doesn't have the same representation as a screen print would. It has a little bit more hand involved, so
Yes.
it raises more questions, and it's probably for the best anyway.
It's a really cool process. Thank you for sharing your work with us. This is a really beautiful body of work, and I'm excited to see where you end up after the residency is finished. Now we want to invite young people out there to make their own art based on this. So what we're asking you to do is to think of characters, people, legends, people from books, people from history, people from video games that have been part of shaping your identity. And we want you to make art based on that person. And at home, you have the opportunity to do that with screen printing if you have that. If not, maybe you're making a drawing based on that. Maybe you're doing a painting. We showed you screen printing because it's a great tool that we have that can make multiples. But this can just be a launching pad for you to go and make your own work and share your identity with people around you by making art.